Class division shaped every aspect of life, but so did the boundaries of gender. Roman society was deeply patriarchal. The paterfamilias ruled not just as head of his household, but as the public face of his family. Women, whether patrician or plebeian, free or enslaved, could not vote or hold political office. Their social value was tied to their relationships with men, their fathers, husbands, and sons. A handful of elite women wielded influence behind the scenes or through religious roles such as the revered Vestal Virgins, but for most, daily life revolved around the demands of the home, managing servants, raising children, and overseeing household affairs. However, especially during the empire, some women also participated in economic life, running businesses or working outside the home, reflecting both practical necessity and shifting social boundaries. Imagine the city of Rome at dawn, its narrow streets already alive with purpose. Beneath the tiled roofs and towering insulae, a million lives begin another day. For most Romans, morning started early, with the sun just cresting the 7 hills. In the modest apartments of the city's many insula, families would rise for a light breakfast, what they called the ientaculum. This first meal was simple, a piece of coarse bread, perhaps dipped in olive oil or served with crumbly cheese. If luck allowed, a piece of fruit, an apple, a handful of figs, or a few wrinkled chestnuts might accompany the bread. It was a modest start, but it fueled the city's laborers, shopkeepers, and children as they spilled into the streets to work, trade, or learn. The markets, or macella, quickly filled with the clamor of bargaining voices and the scent of fresh produce. For many, these bustling spaces were as much social hubs as places to buy food. Housewives, servants, and slaves jostled for vegetables, lettuce, cabbage, and leeks piled high, while the better off might seek out sausages, eggs, or a rare cut of pork. The diet of ordinary Romans, especially in the crowded city, was shaped by necessity and the rhythms of supply. Bread made from wheat imported on a staggering scale over 400,000 metric tons each year to feed Rome's teeming population was the staple. The poor often ate dark, dense loaves, while the wealthy enjoyed soft white panis candidus. Alongside bread, there were legumes, broad beans, lentils, and chickpeas, simmered into stews or mashed into nourishing mush. Olive oil and wine, the other pillars of the so-called Mediterranean triad, found their way onto most tables, if not always in abundance. Most Romans, especially those living in insula, did not have kitchens at home. Cooking over an open flame was risky in the cramped, flammable confines of these apartment blocks, so many people turned to the Thermopolia street-side eateries that lined the city's thoroughfares. Archaeological finds in Pompeii reveal nearly 90 of these establishments in a town of just 15,000, suggesting their ubiquity in larger cities like Rome. Here, a hurried laborer or busy housewife could buy a bowl of hot stew, a piece of bread, or a cup of wine, eaten quickly at a counter or taken home. These thermopolia, or food vendors offering steaming bowls of hot fare, provided an essential service for those without the means or space to cook at home. For lunch, or prandium, the fare was much the same: bread, cold cuts of meat if one could afford them, perhaps some fish or hard-boiled eggs, and always the ever-present vegetables. The main meal, the cena, was taken in the late afternoon or evening. For the wealthy, this could be a lavish affair, with multiple courses and exotic spices imported from distant lands, but for most, it remained humble. Pulse, a thick porridge of grains, might be served with beans or greens. Occasionally, pork, the most common meat for those who could afford it, would make an appearance, flavored with garum, a pungent fish sauce beloved by Romans of every class. Fish and beef were rare treats, and even chicken or goat was not everyday fare for the ordinary citizen. Yet despite these limitations, Roman cooks were inventive, making use of whatever the markets provided and drawing on flavors from across the empire. Clothing, too, reflected both practicality and status. The basic garment for everyone was the tunic, knee-length for men, longer and often sleeved for women. Wool was the most common material, though linen was also used, and for the truly wealthy, silk and cotton imported from distant lands were signs of luxury. The toga, that iconic symbol of Roman citizenship, was reserved for formal occasions and for men who enjoyed the rights of a citizen. Its heavy folds and impractical bulk made it ill-suited to daily work, but it spoke volumes about the wearer's place in society. For married women, the stola, a long draped overdress, marked their status, while the palla, a mantle, was worn outdoors. Even the colors and decorations of clothing revealed social rank. Senators wore broad purple stripes, equestrians narrow ones, and only the elite could indulge in the deep, costly dye of Tyrian purple. Most Romans wore sandals, shoes, or boots, with rural folk sometimes donning wooden clogs. Clothing was expensive, often recycled, and its production, spinning, and weaving was considered a virtuous task for women of all classes. Personal grooming and hygiene were woven into the fabric of daily life. Public bathhouses, or thermae, dotted the city, their doors open to men and women alike at different hours. Here, Romans bathed, exercised, socialized, and conducted business. Cleaning the body did not involve soap, but rather olive oil, which was smeared onto the skin and then scraped off with a curved metal tool called a strigil. Tweezers, razors, and nail cleaners were common, and elaborate hairstyles and cosmetics, especially among the elite, were sources of pride and fashion. Laundry was laborious and, by modern standards, unorthodox urine, collected from public vessels, was prized for its cleaning power. Most ordinary Romans, especially in the city, lived in insulae multi-story apartment buildings that could be crowded, noisy, and perilous. The ground floors often housed shops and the best apartments, while those further up, reached by steep staircases, were smaller, darker, and cheaper. Fires and building collapses were all too common, and privacy was rare. The wealthy, by contrast, enjoyed single-family domus, with spacious rooms arranged around a sunlit atrium, a private garden, and sometimes even indoor plumbing and heated floors. In the countryside, the richest Romans retreated to sprawling villas with baths, gardens, and amenities unimaginable to the urban poor. Daily routines revolved around work, market visits, and household chores. After the day's business, many Romans made their way to the baths, not just to wash but to meet friends and exchange news. Household tasks, preparing food, cleaning, laundering clothes, were constant, especially for those without servants or slaves. Public toilets, often connected to bathhouses, provided communal facilities where Romans used sea sponges on sticks or pottery shards in lieu of more modern comforts. Throughout it all, rituals to the household gods, the lares offered moments of spiritual connection, a thread of continuity in lives shaped by routine and necessity. In these small details, the bite of black bread, the drape of a woolen tunic, the bustle of the market, the warmth of a crowded bathhouse, we glimpse the essential rhythms of Roman life. While much remains unknown, especially about the routines of children, slaves, or rural families, the surviving evidence paints a picture of a society where class and status colored every aspect of daily existence, yet where the ordinary routines of eating, dressing, and living bound Romans together across the centuries. From the first light of dawn, the rhythm of Roman days was set in motion by the labor of countless hands. In the countryside, families rose early, working together to coax life from the land. Farming was not simply a man's task but a family enterprise. Women, children, and elders all played their part, tending vineyards, gathering olives, or caring for livestock. The fields formed the backbone of Roman society, so deeply woven into daily life that, for most Romans, the changing seasons governed the very structure of the year. Beyond the farm, the cities of Rome and her empire buzzed with a different kind of energy. The streets echoed with the sounds of commerce and craft. Narrow alleys were lined with tavernae, small shops with counters open to the street, where shoemakers hammered leather, bakers tended their ovens, and thermopolia, or food vendors, offered steaming bowls of hot fare to passers-by. Many shopkeepers lived just above or behind their businesses. For the fortunate, this meant a modest degree of security, while for others, it simply reflected the cramped realities of city living. Larger establishments, such as bakeries, often contained the entire process from grinding grain to baking loaves, their millstones turning from dawn until dusk. Urban life offered a wide array of occupations. Some Romans were doctors, teachers, or architects. Others were merchants, soldiers, jewelers, smiths, or entertainers. The city's heartbeat depended as much on the clatter of construction workers erecting new insulae as on the measured words of accountants and government officials. Women, especially in the empire, sometimes owned businesses or worked outside the home, a sign of both practical necessity and shifting boundaries, though the evidence remains sparse and uneven. Still, whether in the bustling market or the more refined world of the arts, many skilled and menial positions were held by slaves, whose labor underpinned much of Roman prosperity. For those with little, the army beckoned as a possible path upward. Regular pay, the promise of land, and the chance for social mobility attracted many of the poor to military service. The legions became a microcosm of Roman society, a place where discipline and loyalty could sometimes transcend birth and class. Despite the ceaseless demands of work, Romans valued odium leisure as a necessary counterbalance to negotium, the business of life. When work ended, usually by early afternoon, the city's public spaces filled with people seeking relaxation and diversion. The Campus Martius, a broad expanse near the city's heart, was a favorite haunt for those wishing to exercise, especially boys. Ball games and races were common, and while women and girls were less frequently seen in these pursuits, there are glimpses of their participation in games and swimming, even if such occasions were rare. Home life, too, offered its entertainments. Music and dancing enlivened dinner parties among the wealthy, while simpler households might gather for board games, dice, knucklebones, or Roman chess whose rules and strategies passed from generation to generation. These games, along with the occasional bout of singing or storytelling, provided respite from the fatigue of daily toil. Nowhere was the Roman appetite for spectacle more apparent than in the grand public entertainments. On festival days, the city seemed to empty into its monumental arenas and stadiums. The Colosseum, vast enough to seat up to 80,000, thundered with the excitement of gladiatorial combat. Chariot races at the Circus Maximus drew crowds of up to 150,000, the roar of the masses echoing across the city. Theatrical performances, too, brought people together, filling open-air theaters with laughter, gasps, and applause. These public spectacles were more than mere distractions. They were communal rituals, binding the city together in shared emotion, competition, and awe. Religious festivals marked the calendar in bold strokes, suspending the ordinary routines of work and commerce. During these feriae, even slaves were meant to pause and take part in the communal celebrations. Saturnalia, perhaps the most famous, turned the social order upside down with feasting and the temporary reversal of roles, allowing a glimpse, if only for a day, of a world less bound by hierarchy. Other festivals, like Compitalia, brought neighbors together for ritual and revelry, reinforcing the bonds of community. The boundaries between public and private life were fluid, shaped more by the nature of the activity than the space itself. Public baths, bustling markets, communal toilets, these were gathering places as much as sites of necessity, where news was exchanged, deals struck, and friendships forged. The Forum, with its mingling of politics, trade, and gossip, stood at the very heart of civic life. Most Romans, especially the urban poor, lived in crowded insulae, multi-story apartment blocks that offered little privacy but constant company. Family, the familia, remained the essential unit, its members sharing work, meals, and responsibility. Women managed households and finances. Some, particularly in the empire, also participated in economic life by owning businesses or working outside the home, though they could not vote or hold political office. Children learned what they could depending on the family's means. Social mobility, though possible through military service or successful trade, was limited. For most plebeians, life was a cycle of constant labor relieved by moments of communal pleasure and ritual. When evening fell and the city's noise faded, Romans looked to the next day, another round of work, another chance for leisure, and another opportunity to gather with neighbors in the shifting interplay of public and private life. The rhythm of Roman days, shaped by necessity and desire, bound ordinary people together in a world that was at once demanding, vibrant, and profoundly communal.